Hey, welcome to the Exit Teams podcast, where business owners and their advisors get real-world insight on how to build a team of advisors, maximize value, and exit on their own terms. I'm your host, Bob Tankesley, author of Exit Teams. Build a team of advisors for your business sale to get a higher price. You can find that book and all kinds of content at exitteams.com. So whether you're years away from selling or thinking about an exit now, this episode is packed with must-know tips to help you avoid costly mistakes. Let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by a true expert in the world of wealth management, my good friend Cody Moore. Cody holds a degree in finance from the University of North Georgia and has earned the Certified Exit Planning Advisor designation, also known as CEPA in the industry. Great job, Cody. After beginning his career in the software and IT industry, Cody transitioned into wealth management, where he found his passion for building long-term client relationships and helping executives and business owners align their financial decisions with their personal and professional goals. He works closely with business owners and senior executives to help them pursue a work optional lifestyle. I like that phrase, providing guidance across key financial and strategic decisions. Cody is actively involved with the Financial Planning Association of Georgia and the Association for Corporate Growth. Cody, welcome. I am really glad you could be on the show. I've been looking forward to this one. The issues we're going to talk about today are just crucial, but often overlooked. I guess my first question would be you're in a wealth management role. Where do you see a wealth manager ideally becoming involved in a business owner's world as they start to um, consider exit? You know, what tends to be going on in their life? How many years out does that tend to be?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Happy to dive into it, and appreciate you having me on, Bob, and appreciate the kind words. So oftentimes I'll find that a business owner will loop us in for the first time. When they reach some sort of pain point, usually it's they're a lot of times, unfortunately, it's hey, I'm thinking about selling my business, or I'm already in the process of selling my business.
Yeah,
We plan on closing in a few months, and what can we do now? And unfortunately, a lot of times it's a little bit too late to implement a lot of the strategies and state tax and investment strategies that we can utilize to help at that point. But ideally, if we can get involved with folks really as they're running their business, we've got a lot of expertise on our team to do a lot of the consulting that comes about with our business owner clients from whether or not they're starting to grow and they want to bring in employee benefits, 401k, things like that. We've got a lot of folks to leverage in our network there. But really, if we can get involved and help at least 2 years out, a year, 2 years out at least, is a good spot for us to be. Ultimately, what we try to do on my team is quarterback the whole process. So depending on the deal size, we'll bring in a number of different parties. We'll bring in a handful of investment bankers that we've worked with and have experience with to allow the client business owner to vet them out, see what's the right feel for them, who do they like the best, who do they think personally will do the best job. And then we'll also bring in our network of M&A attorneys, M&A tax advisors, CPA, stuff like that to help really bring a rock star team together to help with the full deal process. We want to really maximize value as much as we can and minimize taxes as much as we can, of course, 100% legally.
yeah, yeah, all within the bounds of the law. So a
Absolutely.
year or two out, ideally. I kind of coincides with when I'd like to be brought in before uh, actually taking a company to market to get it sold to build that buyer pool too. So, but like you said, I too often I'm even brought in late. The owner's decided I'm ready to sell now. Can you help me? Well, yeah, we can package that up and do our best and build as big a buyer pool as possible. But there are some things we could have done, uh, you know, in the years leading up to um, to a transaction. So on the personal side, kind of under the heading of pre-exit
Mhm.
personal readiness, what personal financial planning should happen before a business goes to market? So you got your year or two, maybe even longer if they give it to you, of prep time. But on the personal side, what do you guys like to do? What do you guys like to put into place?
Yeah, so we think personal planning is just as important as business planning and the financial planning. So, the biggest thing that is overlooked that I've seen is planning for what's going to happen after. What are you going to do? A lot of business owner clients are kind of always operating with their hair on fire. They're juggling 10 different plates at the same time.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen that. Everyone's got it all well organized. They know what their day, their month, their year looks like.
Exactly. So, the what's often overlooked is and maybe a little bit of that is just the world we live in and expectations of what you're always striving for is to get to that big payday and then officially just quit so you can just sit back on the beach and drink a margarita in paradise. Reality I've seen is maybe you can do that for about a week, but at some point, especially an entrepreneur is going to start itching to do something. So really planning personally, looping in, having a sit down with the family early on in the process to say, hey, let's talk about this together. One, were you even looped into have any idea that they were thinking about selling the business? I've seen, that happen. I've actually seen some deals after an LOI is signed and they're working on due diligence, looping the spouse in, and at that time, and,
Oh,
and
wow.
realizing, oh, that's this is not going to end up working, and deal falls through sort of at the finish line at that point. So
Hey, honey, I'm selling this year.
you
Oh,
ready to spend 60 hours a week with me? Exactly. So doing a personal planning meeting really early on, especially to loop in the family and talk about, what does life after exit look like? What do you want to be doing with your time? Us just as humans, we've got to be doing something that's giving us fulfillment. We, especially again as entrepreneurs and business owners, are not too good at sitting around and doing nothing. So that's why we phrase what we plan for instead of a retirement date, your work optional date, because at that point your work optional, you can go work at a golf course so you can get free golf on the weekends, or you can go work for that charity for $0 an hour that you've had a passion for your whole life but haven't had the time for. So just finding something, what do you want to do after you exit, and having a plan for that's really important just for the fulfillment. And it's a major point to having a successful exit to where you're not regretting it afterwards. I've heard you talk about some of the stats before of how many folks actually end up selling their business, but almost more importantly, how many folks regret selling their business after. And so that's a major point of emphasis we try to sit down and figure out. There's we also need to take a look at where the business is at now, take a look at what it's worth, and run a valuation and see, okay, here's what you've been earning, here's the income we've talked about that you're going to need to be officially work optional, and here's maybe the gap, the valuation. Maybe it's $5 million that you feel that we've done some analysis of what you need to feel comfortable for the rest of your life, and maybe your business is worth 3 or 4 million. How are we going to bridge that gap? So
let's talk about that because on the personal side, we talk in the industry about personal balance sheets, and a huge chunk, at least in my experience, of a business owner's personal balance sheet is that on the asset side is loaded up with the likely, maybe someone's done a fair market value, but the estimated value of the business, and they might have some commercial real estate. The business might be occupying some commercial real estate. The business owner might have, rental in the mountains or rental at the beach, what have you, various other kinds of assets. In your experience, how big of a chunk have you seen the business be of a business owner's personal balance sheet?
I've seen, I would say at least on average, 80 to 90% A lot of times business owners, might be incredibly successful, but I think most people would be shocked at how illiquid and strapped for cash a lot of business owners are when you actually look at the liquidity they have on their personal balance sheet. That is, I've seen a lot of instances where they're 99% of their net worth is is tied
Oh,
up in the
wow.
business, and there's very little assets set aside. That's another reason why I think it's really important to be working with a financial planner early on in the process. Not, of course, for the exit, preparing and getting your business to drive that maximum value and make sure it's going to net the proceeds you need for the rest of your life to live on and whatever your plans are. But more importantly, to help start putting strategies into place. There's a lot of advantages in the tax code to being a business owner and things you can set up. Obviously you could set up a 401k for your business, but there's a lot of times you might have a solopreneur out there who's got a good sized business going on, and there's things SEP IRAs, solo 401ks, ways that they can start using some of those oftentimes very significant cash flows to start diversifying a little bit of their personal balance sheet.
Yep. And here we sit at the beginning of 2026 and some tax code changes that took effect last year. Some of those provisions took effect just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, seem to be fairly favorable for business transactions, at least for the next, fingers crossed, at least for the next 3 years. After that, it's anybody's guess. Just to back up a little bit, you talked a few minutes ago about valuation and how important it is for owners to know. Quick stat for everybody listening, about 2%, yeah, 2% of owners on average tend to have a solid understanding of their business value. So get with your financial advisor, get with Cody and his team, and start asking some tough questions long before going to market. Another stat you mentioned was, how low of a likelihood it is that companies in the lower end of the middle market can be sold, and that percentage is 4% of all the
Wow.
companies that exist. Yeah, I get re-shocked every time I say 2% and 4%, but those are the real stats. They keep showing up in all the surveys year after year. So, is it a year or two ahead of time of going to market where owners need to start all this preparation and planning, or is it 3, 4, 5? I think, quite honestly, the real answer is as early as they can get in front of someone like you or someone like me. So when they sell, I'm talking about that moment of liquidity. The deal is done. All the wires are flying all over the place. Everybody's getting taken care of, and the deal is getting settled. I know you do this. You help owners, I'm sure, manage from a psychological standpoint this sudden wealth. Here it is, this 80, 90 plus percent chunk of their net worth that was tied up in the company is now available. It's now, it's now ready to have something done with it that doesn't involve the business. What do you guys have um, I'm sure you thought about this well ahead of the close, but walk our audience through what helping an owner psychologically deal with this big chunk of money that they did not have access to before.
Yeah. Yeah, great question, because that is it can be a shock, and it can be a lot of folks' downfall of having that large of a lump sum hit their bank account, and then
Please tell me the stats aren't as bad as someone winning the lottery and spending it all within 5 years.
not nearly that bad, nowhere near that bad, but yeah, it's a big difference, especially at that point when you've kind of just had your sights set on driving down the field, and now all of a sudden you're at a point where there's not an obvious next step and something dangling right in front of you to continue to chase after, and you don't have the 10, 20 plates spinning all at the same time anymore. Now you kind of have no plates spinning, and you've done it. I think the first place that a lot of the preparation for that starts would be early on in the process. Hopefully, like you said, if it's 3, 4, 5 years out from an exit, that's a really great place to start. to start putting plans in place, to start with financial planning, taking a look at folks' balance sheet, putting that together for them, looking at projections, looking at income, figuring out together where that needs to be, and really analyzing
Yeah.
all the needs there. Preparing, sitting down with the family too, and talking about what are the plans for what you're going to do again for fulfillment and things like that after the exit. But really, I think having a plan already in place, so when that money hits, that there's already a design, there's already a place and a structure for where that money is going. A lot of times there are different tax and estate strategies that we'll put into place with different trusts, installment sale trusts, charitable remainder trusts, things like that. So actually, some of the dollars will be rerouting from directly to the business owner's checking account, for instance, into some of these trusts. There'll be
Okay.
distribution rates and strategies for how money's going to flow out of there and work to fund their income for the rest of their lives. And then, whether it's charities, it's estate planning and wealth transfer strategies around, lowering the estate tax under the limit. So there's having that set plan in place for where all the dollars are going, what they're doing, and really the purpose for why they're there. I think is really imperative to have, so that you know what your dollars are doing, and you don't just have a large lump sum sitting there, and you just start finding ways to get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Then the relatives and the friends come out of the woodwork and hey, I heard you just sold. I need I need some help with my whatever.
Right, right,
So I
yeah.
guess that would be a mistake, would be not having a plan for deploying any of that liquidity after the event, um, spending it on things that might not be as productive as you'd like to see. Any other, maybe a mistake or two that you might have seen owners make in the past, not under your guys' stewardship, of course, but I hear all the time of what owners spend their money on. But what have you seen?
Yeah, here's a good example I just ran into, I believe it was yesterday. And now, again, as you mentioned, this wasn't somebody, it wasn't one of our clients, but it was somebody that had exited. This was about 10 years ago. So it was a little while in the past, and sort of just an extreme story or example that was shared with me. And they basically, they, first of all, didn't know what their business was worth, hadn't had a proper valuation done. So
Mm.
just knew, okay,
Part of that,
I'm
part of that 98% that go to
exactly.
market not knowing.
Exactly. So they had just basically done the math. Okay, I'll probably live after I sell the business 30 years. I spend about, I don't remember the exact number, let's just say $300,000 a year. And so I need to sell for X so that I can spend $300,000 a year. And then at the end of year 30, I'll spend my last dollar, and we'll be done. So
So no
literally
kids, no charitable planning, no legacy planning.
no planning around any of that, just purely and I'm talking cash in a checking account, straight line,
Okay.
drawing it down year after year. And that's, no offense to the business owner that did that, in case they might hear this. But that is massively reducing what you could have done with that money. What we typically plan for with clients is to get you to whatever your income, we call it a desired income goal, not just meeting your expenses and maybe what you hope for in retirement, but really that ideal retirement
So
where you're
let's spend some time on that because I hear this often, more so of the smaller size companies, but it can
Mhm.
occur, with fairly decent sized lower middle market companies as well. I always shudder when I hear this, but often it comes up, Bob, I don't know where my income's going to come from. Well, what do you mean? Well, I get a W-2 for my business. Let's just say I run certain things through my business, the boat, the plane, the cars, the vacation home, the kids' college. I like my business running because it affords me a nice lifestyle. So in their mind, they're thinking, I sell the company, then all that stuff goes away. But But let's spend some time on that because let's maybe on this on in this this episode we can dispel a lot of faulty thinking that you know that is not selling your company does not mean the end of your income stream.
Absolutely. Yeah, the real key to the example I was just discussing was making sure your money's working for you. Back to the rich dad, poor dad days of, making sure your money is, in different types of assets that are going to be, appreciating and growing for you. Ideally, you would get to a point, and this is what we help our clients plan for, is where the dollars and the assets that you have, especially from an exit, from the liquidity you receive from an exit, would be at a point where it's growing to not only give you all the income you want, but to keep pace and outpace inflation over the years, to where oftentimes I would say vast majority of our clients are going to leave behind more money than they started with because their money is going to be working for them. In a diversified portfolio, different asset classes, things like that, where your dollars are invested just like they were in your private business before, but now they're invested in a more broad, diversified array of investments that are going to be generating income and growth so that you can have a very safe, that's a dangerous word in our industry, but a safer, consistent income stream throughout your retirement and work optional years, to where you can essentially spend all that income every year and know that it's going to continue to come in and be sustainable rate, again, so that oftentimes folks are leaving behind a significant amount more than what they started with because of letting those assets work for them in this case.
It kind of sounds like you're talking about both growth on one hand and protection on the other hand, and those can be achieved at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bit of difference to where you're going to get income from. You've got your fixed income assets, you've got assets like equities, stocks that are going to be, the actual capital will be appreciating. You'll have some dividends you can have from there. Of course, there's real estate where you can get rental income from and then sell the property, for and realize some capital appreciation. I think one thing that I see very often with folks is that they think of income generating assets as either bonds that pay a fixed interest rate or dividends from stocks. But there are, whether it comes from the growth of a stock, the growth of the real estate, or whether it comes from actual income paid for it, it's all growth on your dollars. It's all your dollars working for you. And those are all different ways where your assets are generating growth that you will use as income
Just growing
in there.
at different rates.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, we're talking about an owner with a concentrated business risk. So much of their net worth is tied up in the company, and I could see now why you need a year or two of prep time to get them thinking about in their mind changing something that they've been doing for probably 20 plus years to something they're going to be doing 20 plus more years after selling. You're getting them to think of from a concentrated risk standpoint. I know I've got a few eggs in this basket. I'm watching over it very carefully. I know what's in it, to more of a diversified approach. It just hit me that's why I could see now, year or two would be next,
Yeah,
would be
that's
ideal.
I'll say that's a common theme that I run into with business owners is and entrepreneurs especially, of moving into investments in as much as everybody's heard about the stock market, the S&P 500 and all these different things, moving into essentially owning small portions of businesses that somebody else is running and somebody else controls is oftentimes uncomfortable and scary for business owners. They're like, you know what, I could put X amount of dollars into the stock market, or I could just put those dollars back into my business, and I
I
know
can
I'm
get a
in control.
40% return in my own business. Why would I want to ever sell it, leave it?
Exactly. And there's this I wouldn't say death grip, but just like comfortability with the control and what they know. And so, like you said, a year or two in advance, even something as simple as some of those examples that business owners can take advantage of that I mentioned earlier, solo 401ks or the company 401k that is, in being able to diversify some of those cash flows and getting them into investments that are outside the business can just help with comfortability and experience of more traditional, so to say, investments prior to the exit, and then having all of your eggs in different baskets that you're not used to.
We're kind of talking too about purpose and identity, really, at the end of the day. Um, the owner is the business is the owner. I see that too often. You probably do as well. And buyers are often concerned about that. Whole set of other issues. That's another podcast we'll do later. But helping the owner see themselves without their business, but still having purpose and still having an identity. I imagine you guys are spending some good quality time helping them see or define what's next beyond this liquidity event, beyond this money that they're going to be in possession of, a lot more liquid. You're probably having some deep conversations that often get into psychological, spiritual, a whole range of issues that I can't. I don't get into the attorney, the CPA. You guys are in that key role, kind of part psychologist too, I imagine.
Oh yeah, that's a major part of the job. We actually joke sometimes. We've got in our conference room, we've got some snacks and food. We've got notepads to write on, and then we've also got a box of tissues in the corner.
Uh,
And it's not uncommon to have to go grab one of those for a client.
and not just because somebody in the room is sick and they need to blow their nose, but
Right.
they're having a hard time hearing what you're telling them or coming to grips with what they're now thinking based on what you're telling them.
Yeah, we get really close with our clients, building that relationship to be able to manage and help folks plan with their life savings and what they want to do with their life is obviously a deep and can be a touchy subject. And there's a lot of transparency and vulnerability in those meetings oftentimes. But really the experience of getting to see so many different folks go through retirement at once gives us a lot of experience on maybe some what to do, some hey here I saw so well I wouldn't name them obviously, but I've seen retirements go this way and I've seen them go this way, and this is the successful route, fulfilling, happy, and this
Yep.
is more of a what not to do sort of scenario. So it is really important. One of the sort of terminologies within our methodology that we use is like a three-legged bar stool. You've got your business planning. That's obviously very important to your exit. Oftentimes that's seen as the most important, but we like to see the three legs be obviously equally weighted: personal planning and financial planning, business planning, personal planning, and financial planning. So planning personally, more of qualitative topics about what are you going to do with your time, having a set, just as much as it's important to have a set plan in place for when those dollars land, what you're going to do with them to generate income and all the other steps of the process. It's equally really as important to have a plan in place for personally. What are you going to do?
Yep.
What are you going to put your time and attention towards? These owners and entrepreneurs are builders and visionaries, and maybe it's some consulting with friends who are in the industry, and other types of folks. I've got a client now that has sold their business. This is kind of a common thing that you see is serial entrepreneurs. They sell a business and they just so happen to accidentally acquire another business for fun
Yeah.
while they're at the beach or something like that. And so this client's gone down that route, has a nice successful retirement business, I guess you could call it, and now is helping other folks that are in small size businesses to be able to do some exit planning of their own, just from his own experience. So just having some plan in place for what you're going to do afterwards, what you're going to do to seek fulfillment is really just as important as having the financial plan and business plan in place.
You hear that, business owners listening? It's a three-leg stool. It's not a two-leg stool because last time I checked, two legs isn't very stable and tends to fall over. I like how you guys separate the personal from the financial. I imagine when most people hear personal, they initially think, well, that is the financial, but they are two distinctly separate things. And talking about a box of tissues, I've sold a lot of companies, and not once has a owner becoming a seller not shed a few tears toward the very end. It's getting real. We're right at closing. Sometimes it happens at closing, but even the toughest of them, yeah, it's now hitting what they're about to do. You mentioned a few minutes ago a spouse that didn't find out until after an LOI was signed, but let's be realistic. Conversations should be happening before that, right? What kind of conversations instead of honey, I just sold the company or I'm about to sell it, in the years leading up, what should owners be saying to and having conversations about with their spouses?
Yeah, I think just initially talking about exploring the topic, and when that starts is really important to just share so that everybody's on the same page. um, I mentioned earlier that we like to have a planning meeting with the family. Sometimes that incorporates kids, especially if they're
Mm,
involved in the business. Let's all sit down and say, okay, here's what we're looking at. We're going to be doing a valuation on the business. We're exploring different exit opportunities. It's still, probably 3 to 5 years down the road, but we're just starting the planning process and looking at options and starting to talk about personal and business strategy from there. And so, if the children are in the business, that can be obviously very touchy and important. Whether the children are going to continue in the business and become the new leaders, or whether everybody's gonna sell and move on, it is very important, and that's why we typically like to have husband and wife in the meeting together when we're doing financial planning in general, but especially starting off these conversations, it's very important. We found it to be successful to have that personal family planning meeting early on if we can.
yeah. Okay, so the deal is done. The check has arrived, or the wire. It's usually a wire. From that point forward, the owner should be thinking about what they now have, and to some extent we've kind of talked about this already, but they've hopefully worked with you guys years in advance. They have a better plan. A plan is better than no plan, but a well-executed plan is even better than just plain having a plan. So after they sell, they've got liquidity risks that I think this is a big deal. Um, Things that they didn't expect to have to pay for.
Mm.
And I guess, to some extent, we're talking much later in life, the healthcare issues and things like that. But let's face it, a lot of these owners are boomers and they've got adult age children with different kinds of needs. Excuse me. Um, so I imagine that a lot of that stuff, the possibility of a lot of that stuff needs to be factored into the planning as well.
Yeah, I think it's smart to have a plan for gifting and giving, less to charity, but more so sort of set rules and parameters in place before you have all that liquidity sort of fall in your lap, so to say. It's much harder when it happens to think on the fly. Well, I love my kids. I want to help with this. Now they kind of know we sold. They're asking me questions, and a lot of times, what we'll do ahead of time, ahead of the sale, is have one of our partners that will bring in an estate planning attorney to set trust in place. If that's something that they think they're going to want to do, they'll go ahead
Hmm.
and set some trust in place and decide, okay, these are assets that we're going to set aside, and we're going to gift to children, or we're going to gift XYZ to kids now. I had a recent scenario with a company that we helped sell last year, which was really cool. They had done the planning ahead of time and decided, okay, if we sell for this number, this is what we're going to give to these were 4 adult children that actually worked with the business in some capacity.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we all sat around the conference room and got to let the children know that they were all going to be given $1 million from the sale of this business for, of course, whatever they needed it for, but they did work on the business and help grow it with the parents. Obviously, not quite to the extent the owners of the business did, But that was really cool because oftentimes we will do estate and wealth transfer planning. Okay, this asset's going to be over here. We're going to set up this trust for kids. We want to do 529s for our grandkids to make sure they're taken
Yep.
care of for college. But to be able to give a gift like that during a lifetime is and be able to share that information is pretty cool. I think that's probably the only time that I can recall letting somebody know that they've received. I wouldn't say one. We didn't have a giant check that we handed to them like a game show, but being able to let them know that they were receiving that, and that was pretty rewarding and cool to see. So I think it's just important to think ahead of time, and as part of the planning, think about what you're going to be willing to gift, what you want to set aside, how you want to take care of family down the road, and have that already lined up before the liquidity hits. And then, I've seen, unfortunately, less with business owners, but just some aging clients in the past be kind of getting milked a bit from family members and that know they've got some significant assets. So I think it's important to just have those parameters in the idea of what you're going to do and give or not give ahead of time is good, so that when the money hits, you already know and it's set.
Yeah. Yeah. Four kids in the business. That's interesting. I have five, so maybe there's still hope that four or five of them do this kind of work as well. You mentioned them receiving something from the proceeds of the sale. Owners do that often for key people as well, and sometimes all the employees. Did you see recently a company was sold in Louisiana for something like 1.3 billion, and the owner, I think it was to manage tax brackets. The owner made sure that 240 million was distributed out to all the employees, based on tenure, responsibility, and things like that. But that was the most extreme example. That's definitely a liquidity need. Also, I talk a bit about inflation, longevity, market volatility. I mean, these are risks post close after they've sold the company that owners need to manage as well.
Yeah, that's really important. And that sort of goes back to talking about the example where the gentleman just put all the cash in his checking account and just slowly, drew that down. Of course, it's just a principle of investing. Your dollars are getting eroded by inflation every year. So not only you don't have maybe any risk of them going down, but the reality is your purchasing power is decreasing every year, somewhere 2 to 3% at least if you look at historical inflation averages. So really important to get your money working for you for that reason. So that way, at least you're, keeping pace with inflation and making sure that your purchasing power is continuing to keep pace with that. We're
Something
planning.
about the rule of 72, if you divide 72 by a percentage rate, maybe a 3% inflation rate, that'll tell you the number of years at which things will cost twice as much. 72,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah. So 72 divided by 3 is what, 24? It'll take 24 in 24 years at a moderate 3% inflation rate, everything is suddenly worth it costs twice as much as it used to. So you got to keep up with that.
Exactly. It's really that's one of the biggest things to keep up with. Obviously, there's all sorts of things these days with medical costs increasing, people living longer too, but
Much faster than 3%. Those
much faster than
medical
3%.
care
That's
expenses.
right. Yeah, and as unfortunate as that is, but yeah, you want to be able to have your money growing so that it's creating the income for you every year that you can spend, but also making sure it's growing and keep outpacing really inflation. When it comes to longevity, we plan for essentially a never-ending retirement for our clients. The reality is, if you want to plan, some folks will be like, my dad, his dad, and his dad's dad have all died at nobody's lived past 80. And so I'm going to plan, to live to 85 and I want to write my last check then. And obviously,
That's one approach.
that's an approach. There's the biggest factor there is obviously nobody knows when's going to be their time, so you can't plan for that. The other factor of that is related to market volatility. what happens if there's a 2008 happens and you're in this scenario 82 and you have a major downturn in your portfolio. That's going to drastically change how long that money's going to last if you're just straight line spending it over a set time frame. So we always like to plan for, clients will say, okay, it looks like we're going through their projections and all the analysis. They've got the income that they need for retirement. Next question oftentimes is, okay, and how long can I live? And we have to say, well, we're planning that whatever your income is going to be sustainable, not only to be able to spend that every year, but for that spending to be increasing each year so that you are keeping pace with inflation. So
Yep.
what we're planning for is we're factoring in market volatility over the years, we're factoring in inflation. And then as far as longevity, we like to plan for essentially what would be a never ending retirement to where their spending is able to be achieved with their portfolio and their assets while also still growing on top of what they're taking out so that they're not slowly running out of money over time.
Yep. No, I like that phrase. Make work optional and a never-ending retirement. Those those sound like two good objectives for owners to try to hit. Hey, under the heading of advisor collaboration, you know, you already mentioned how you work with different kinds of advisors. Do you often see a breakdown? Uh, so let's say an owner has some semblance of a team around themselves, because we talk about, the importance of building teams here on the show. What you have an example or two of a breakdown that happened within the team or among the different advisors on the business owners advisory team?
Yeah, I think it's easy for a business owner to, have reached out to folks over the years, and so they've got an attorney that they work with, they've got a CPA that's been doing their taxes, they've got a wealth manager that's been working, but without incorporating everybody, it's hard to know how everybody's working towards the same goal, and to no fault of any of the parties, the CPA is probably just looking at completing their taxes and helping them be as tax efficient as possible. Where their financial advisor, wealth manager might be looking at making them the most on their investments as possible, and knowing that you're going to pay some tax along the way because hopefully that means you've made a lot of money. And so they're really you need somebody to quarterback kind of the whole team, and that's typically the role. That's the role that we want to play when we're looking at working with business owners, and especially exit planning. Is we want to come in and kind of be their closest advisor, and we want to quarterback all the different advisory teams that they have. And if they've got somebody that's doing that for them, that is totally fine. But oftentimes that's the role we'll step into, because usually we've had some relationship established with the client at that point. And then, of course, ongoing after the liquidity event, we're going to be the ones that they're working with, financially for hopefully the rest of their life, as long as we're doing a good job and continue to earn it. That is. So quarterbacking that and making sure every team member knows what the end goal is and what we're working towards, and that somebody's keeping everybody in the loop for each stage of the process. We found to be really important and helpful.
Business owner is expecting a liquidity event in the next 2 or 3 years. As we wrap up the show, what should they do this month?
I would say the shortest, sweetest answer is know what your business is worth.
Thank you. Thank you for saying.
I'd like to say you need to reach out to us, which I do think it's important to get us or somebody like us to help out. But the biggest thing is know what your business is worth, because whatever that wealth gap is to what you need asset wise to survive for the rest of your life, and maybe your business is worth double that. This was probably meant to be a short and sweet question and answer, but it just brings up a common topic that we've gotten in meetings is, meeting with a business owner, early on in the process. And they're like, okay, I'm going to grow and sell the business in 5 years. And, we'll ask, is that because you want to work another 5 years? Or is that because you think you need to work another 5 years
Ah,
to bring the business
sure.
to X? And so that's where, we can come in, get an idea for what the business is worth, get an idea for what amount of income they need, run some analysis, and we found fairly often that we'll be able to come back and tell that business owner, hey, what the business is worth today is what you need for your dream retirement. So if you want to work another 5 years because it's fun and fulfilling and you enjoy it, perfect. That sounds great. But if you're just grinding each day away, there's no need for you to wait another 5 years. You're ready to go now. So that's something that comes up a good bit, and that's why that valuation and knowing what your business is worth is so important.
Too often, way too often, somebody comes to me and says, I'm ready to sell. Well, what's your motivation? Why would you do that? I word that different ways. At the end of the day, what I end up hearing from them too often is, I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted, my health has changed. Uh, Things which we knew were coming, but were entirely preventable, and they could have gotten ahead of it years in advance. Well, Cody, this has been awesome. I appreciate your time. We've talked about the importance of early valuation, understanding that. We've talked about how critical it is for advisors to collaborate with each other, how important it is to keep up with inflation and manage risk and expenses. Um, After the deal is done, we've talked about how you guys are, kind of part psychologist uh, with how you help clients, and how important it is to bring family in early. That was one of my big takeaways as well. Where can folks get a hold of you to hear more about the good work that you do?
Yeah, we've got social media profiles. We've got a LinkedIn where we share. We do a market minute weekly on hot topics in the markets, economy, taxes related to Trump's bill that we were just talking about. So you can find us there. Our website is wealthep.com. E as in Echo, P as in Paul. You can find out more information about us on there and reach out to us. All of our contact information is on that website.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks for your time again, Cody. I'll see you soon. Hey, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Exit Teams podcast. A big thank you to my guest, Cody Moore, for sharing his insights, especially when you consider that proper wealth management is integral to a business sale. If you're a business owner thinking about your next chapter, now is the time to start building your advisory team. You can learn more in my book, Exit Teams. Build a team of advisors for your business sale to get a higher price. Available on Amazon. And don't forget to visit exitteams.com for free resources, tools, and a master class that can help you prepare for a successful exit. Hey, until next time, build your team, sell smart, and take control of your future.